Hello, everybody. So, another Monday. Happy Memorial Day. But today is your usual Bitcoin buy day for MicroStrategy MSTR. He did a big buy, and Bitcoin is above 110K. So, let's begin this video. Friday's price action was mostly due to a tariff scare, in my view, and it was disappointing to say the least. The stock dropped 7.5% on, of course, a Friday morning tweet or whatever saying that tariffs were going to go on June 1st on the European Union. That's 50%. And unbelievable, right? Surprise. Who is surprised? Unbelievable. The tariffs are now delayed until July 9, right? And I wonder if anybody saw that coming. I wonder if I didn't say exactly that this was fluff and talk in the last video. Of course I did. This is talk. This is fluff. Talk and fluff. We have a media that turns talk and that turns, shout matches and language that turns it into a media storm and manufactures media scares, when really we know that this administration should not be judged on words. They don't care about words. They change the words. This is not like China, where people don't want to lose face. Like, this is not the level of the administration. They're about transactions. It's all about transactions. It's all about business. It's all about making a deal. He said he had a good call. Next thing 1 week from now, he'll be like, okay, well, it was bad. Oh, I don't like it. Oh, I don't even like her, not even a little bit, maybe he'll say. And maybe 3 weeks from now, he's going to say, she's the most wonderful person in the world. Why? Because this administration cannot be judged with talk. Talk may apply to some leaders, but it doesn't apply to Trump. Talk is talk, okay? Talk doesn't apply to him. Actions matter. That's why this crash, in my view, was an opportunity. Bitcoin was crashing. Stocks were crashing on Friday because the media manufactured talk into something tangible. But it's just talk. It's just talk. So Saylor took great advantage of that. And he actually did the ATM and he bought Bitcoin, 4,000 Bitcoin, $427 million at $106,000. And right now Bitcoin is trading at $110,000. And so what? Well, that's $4,000 of profit already, in a few days, casually times 4,020 Bitcoin. So you're casually up $16 million on last week's buy alone. The stock right now, MicroStrategy, is trading at a market cap to NAV of a 1.63. It's even lower, right? If it doesn't open way up tomorrow, if MSTR doesn't open way up tomorrow, if it stays the same level, we're going to have a 1.63x, MNAV, equivalent of MNAV, price to NAV of 1.3cx. So what that means is a 6-3x. This is what I said in my last video. What it means is that if you're trading 63% above the Bitcoin, that means that the market is telling you that the present value of a future Bitcoin count is 63%. So 63% is what the market thinks Bitcoin is going to be acquired. The market thinks Saylor is going to acquire 63% more Bitcoin above the current bag of 590,000. So that means the market may say, oh, he's going to acquire 365,000 Bitcoin extra. Except there is a problem. There's a problem because he's guided for 56 billion after removing today's buy of 400 million. There's about 56.2 billion left on the current Bitcoin acquisition plan, which he laid out about 2 months ago. So for over the next 2.5 years, this guy has told you he wants to spend $56 billion of fiat on buying Bitcoin. And so there is a problem because 56 billion of fiat is more than 365,000 Bitcoin. In fact, 365,000 Bitcoin, which is what the market implies by giving a Bitcoin to NAV of a 1.63, 365,000 Bitcoin is only $40 billion. So there's a delta here of 16 billion. Something doesn't add up. Either Bitcoin is going way up, or Saylor is bluffing about the $56 million of fiat that he wants to burn, or really MicroStrategy is undervalued on a price to NAV basis, and the price to NAV should probably be something closer to between a 1.8 and a 2 over the long run for this stock. At least that is my belief. Do you want to bet against Chad's ability to go all in, right? He's had this picture for what, 4 years, 5 years? Do you want to bet against that? No, I don't. He's gonna buy the $56 billion worth of Bitcoin at whatever price, and so if he does that, that means Bitcoin has only one way, and it's up. No financial advice, of course. Let's go into the details. Someone I remember was arguing with me, telling me, "Oh, look, he's not. There's no demand for the strike ATM. There's no demand for the strike ATM." Confusing volatility in the Friday buys. You confuse the volatility in the weekly buys for a lack of demand, right? No, there is a lot of demand for the strike ATM. It just takes a lot of time to ramp up. So this is a print screen of every single buy that is had. Last week was 59 million on the strike ATM. This week, 68 million on the strike ATM. He's ramping up the ATM. And of course, the common ATM, he's tapping it. It depends from week to week. It's random. Sometimes, sometimes above $1 billion, but more often than not, slightly under $1 billion. He's had a down week on the common ATM this week at 448 million. He had an up week on the common ATM. Anyways, the common ATM is a well understood story. The story I follow is the strike ATM, and when I look at the strike ATM, this is the trend of the strike ATM since he started the strike ATM. The trend is way up. He started April 20 with 7 million, then 37 million, then 51 million, then 25 million, then 59 million, then 67 million. So you can see the trend is clearly up. And if next week we get a buy of I don't know, like if we get a $40 million buy next week, that doesn't mean that if there's no demand for the ATM as the market FUD would have really, that doesn't mean that. It's just that he's gauging the market day by day and issuing the best ATM day by day depending on the price that he can get. But the trend is clearly up, and he just started, of course, the Strife ATM. As soon as he announced it, what, was it on Wednesday that he announced that? So that means he already did the ATM the day after the announcement, essentially, because he did 10 million on the Strife ATM. The Strife ATM starts at 10 million. The Strike ATM started on April 20th at 7 million. So I expect that the Strife ATM is going to show a similar trend over the long run. But this is a long-term investment story. We got to be patient. It's going to take months and months for these instruments to ramp up. And then at some point, there will be another instrument. Perhaps, I believe, the next instrument will be an international instrument, an international debt instrument. And we'll have a ramp-up period. And every time Sailor is going to add a financial product to the business, it's going to take a little bit of time to ramp up. And that doesn't mean there is no demand. And as you know, I think he's done with the converts. I realize a lot of people think the converts are still coming. Many people are saying, oh, you got to wait 60 days for him to do the converts. But when I look at the new presentations, when I look at the latest presentation, I don't see much being discussed about the converts, he's talking, of course, about the BTC torque. And how do we understand the BTC torque? Well, essentially, $1 million of Strife is twice as good as $1 million of MSTR newly minted shares. Minting newly minted shares of MSTR common shares is about 1 times less accretive than Strife, right? Strife is twice as accretive, better way to say it. Strife is twice as accretive as MSTR because of the BTC torque, and so that's 12.8 versus 6.9, and of course Strike is a 10 versus MSTR. If you remember the presentation when he had the converts, the Bitcoin torque on the converts was something like an 8. I can't really remember, but he's not even putting the converts in there, right? Do you see converts here? And we know he likes the number 3. A lot of people like the number 3. Why isn't there a converts in there? I think he's mostly done with the converts. And that's why I've called them too good, too pristine. And that's why I like BMAX, and I own BMAX a lot, because that's how you get exposure into the converts. And I see this with Simon Gerovich, which is the CEO of MetaPlanet. And we know they talk, and Bitcoin conference coming up. We're going to talk even more. And he says, yeah, I'm interested, but I really don't want to see folks who are going to short our stock. The problem with the converts as well is that a lot of people say it's debt. It's debt. I see it in my comment section. You tell me, oh, you don't count the debt. It's a bunch of debt. It's a convertible. It's going to convert. It's converts. Once they're in the money, they turn into diluted shares. It's just that the dilution happens, in 28 or in 29 or in 2031. But that's going to be dilution. So at the end of the day, it's not debt. At the end of the day, it's something that's going to convert into equity that's going to dilute. So you get the money today, you dilute later at a higher price. That's the concept of a convertible bond. But because those convertible bonds are going to convert to my MSTR shares, I look at it as dilution. I don't look at it as traditional debt. The market should probably judge the preferreds are much closer to debt, even though it's not traditional debt either, especially in the case of Strike, where 10 shares of Strike can convert. So this story is more complicated than meets the eye, and that gap accounting tells you and classifies the debt on the balance sheet. Well, yeah, just because some old accounting metric says, oh, this is classified as debt on the balance sheet, doesn't mean it's necessarily debt. And so if you look, even in the announcement of today, I'll conclude that even in the announcement to today is like ATM, 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 no converts. Sailor, MicroStrategy, that's mostly an ATM story. You're selling instruments. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. And the volatility. And this is the point about debt. Like, okay, well, the point about debt is that if people buy the converts, they short the shares. That increases volatility on the stock. And I think one of the good questions is, are we not happy with this volatility? This volatility is good enough, if you ask me. This volatility is good enough. Of course, and of course, you can go on the strategy website and they show you their volatility, etc. But I like to use real-world data. So this is me pulling up the volatility on Robinhood. Go to your random broker and look at the volatility on, say, 30-day options. And do the test yourself. See it for yourself, right? Volatility remains super high for MSTR. 77% is the volatility on 30-day options. For reference, if you look at a long, because NVIDIA's volatility is very high this week because there's earnings. But if you go beyond that and you look at the long-term volatility of NVIDIA's earnings and you try to remove the impact of earnings for NVIDIA's volatility is 48.8 versus 77. So not quite a double, but a good 80% higher than NVIDIA. The volatility of MSTR is even higher than Tesla's. Right, it's very, very high. And so do you really need to sell converts so that people can short your stock in order to drive the volatility up? It's up enough. It's up a lot, if you ask me. And that's more. This volatility is more than enough to warrant a premium. Why does it warrant a premium? Because people are doing the wheel, right? People are selling options, getting assigned. Once they're assigned, they're selling more options, getting the shares called, and they do that wheel. And when they do the wheel, you can earn a return that is, right about 77% theoretically, right? But that's all theoretical stuff. But they do the wheel. A lot of managers, like I said, own MSTR because they want to do the volatility thing. That's why they own it. They want to do the volatility game. They don't own it for Bitcoin. And so selling converts, it may come back if people want to own the converts because they like Bitcoin, because they like the asset. And the news cycle, quite frankly, is pro-volatility enough, right? And so maybe the converts come back if volatility ever wanes down. But the news cycle is volatility enough. So you had the tariff shenanigans that I just talked about, and what the media makes of them. It's really the media who's moving on tariffs. We're not looking at facts. We're just looking at talk. But we have short sellers, right? Jim Chanos, very active short seller. He's been on the media. He's been on Twitter saying, "Oh, I'm actively shorting MSTR. I'm actively shorting the stock." Well, good luck with that. That creates some bad press, though, at mainstream financial media, and so that is pro-volatility. So maybe there is no need to add volatility with the converts right now. And I'll conclude with this. This final pro-volatility thing is the what I'm going to call the when liquidated fund. When liquidation or when liquidated, really to make it more meme friendly. That's how they write it, right? They remove the H. You gotta have the milling, the spelling mistake to have some street creds in online culture. When liquidated, and I'm like, come on, further bounce so much below each announcement. I looked at the announcement today of the buy, and you have people, oh, so when is Sailor getting liquidated? Oh, this, oh, that. Oh, it's a disaster waiting to happen. You see all of these comments from surface level thinkers. Frankly, all of these comments just feel like engagement bait at this point, or they feel like engagement farming and all sort of stuff. Because when you look at the balance sheet, I find it more pristine than ever, and I find this to be permanent capital, more permanent capital than ever. Compare this to the average family with a mortgage, right? And then you understand why mortgages are actually social welfare for the middle class. That's what mortgages are, because when you compare to MicroStrategies, debt, look at that. Okay, they only have 8.2 billion of debt, right? That's just the converts. All of this is gonna convert, so it's not gonna have to be repaid. It's gonna just lead to dilution. So at the end of the day, this is gonna be very similar to an ATM. This is just gonna lead to dilution, right? And then you have the preferreds. The preferreds are also technically debt, but they're, in the case of Strike, they're gonna convert too if the person wants, right? If the owners want to convert, there's a bunch of them that are gonna convert, and we're gonna have some very interesting play dynamics between how much that preferred is gonna yield if the price of MicroStrategy pumps, because 10 Strike shares, 10 Strike of a preferred shares is equals 1 share of MicroStrategy. So we're going to have an asset that's going to trade mostly in line with the stock of MSTR once we get past $1,000 for MSTR. So that's going to be very interesting. And we have Strike, which is a perpetual. So the interesting thing is that you have to keep paying the interest, right? But otherwise, the maturity is perpetual. So treating these instruments as raw debt is already a stretch. It's a stretch is what I'm going to call it. But even if you were to say all of the debt is traditional bonds, just do that. Let's just assume it's all traditional bond that matures and has to be repaid, and let's assume we're not going to convert anything to shares. Even if you do that, you can do the debt plus the preferred is only 10% of the market value of the company. Look at the average company, the average house owner, right? Do you only have, on a $500,000 house in the market, do you only have $50,000 of debt if you're the average American? No. With this market, you might even be upside down. So the point is 10% is like year 27 of a 30-year mortgage, and you're almost out of debt. That's where they're at, right? And if you look at the Bitcoin NAV, so if you're one of those folks who assume that the stock of MicroStrategy is someday going to trade at 1, you're only looking at 16% of this debt, which again is extremely conservative if you ask me. It's extremely conservative. They can ramp on the debt, and that's what they're doing now. They're ramping on the debt because they front-loaded a lot of that ATM. This is a long-term story. MicroStrategy is a long-term story. I am so happy to own Strategy, and I look forward to the future and to what this company is going to do to my portfolio. So anyways, this was not financial advice, not investment advice, just entertainment. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow on Patreon, follow on X, comment. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.